We are live.
Oh, we are. This happened to me yesterday with Anne. All right, we're live. Hello, and welcome to StarryTelling. This is where we explore the stories, myth, and magic of the starry skies. My name is Amanda Walsh. I am the founder of Astrology Hub. I'm here with your celestial navigator, sacred astronomer, and astrologer, Gemini Brett. And we're so grateful to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Brett, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. I've been a lot of computer to the point where I'm having a hard time with the English language, apparently. I was out in the garden some today, but not necessarily gardening as much as like designing the new garden bed, which is cool because I was like breaking out a lot of sacred geometry and sacred measurement. And like, if we're gonna put in this thing, like let's have it align to the heavens and all that. So that felt really good. But I'm also just like so busy already, like lots of different presentations and other things, but mostly because I've started building the sacred astronomy course. And it's going to be 42 videos. And I mean, you've seen my work. I get really, really real about it. And I like to dial it in. And so it's been great. And then there's just the struggle of I'm teaching about really being out in earth and receiving that, but how can I do that if I'm just looking at her through the window, right? And trying to be in both of those places and really honor the sacred in every moment. And, so there's like, I can drink tea, as I will, and I can just drink a lot of tea, or I can remember to like have a prayer and set an intention with the spirit of the tea and have a little bit of a ceremony, even if it's just a few minutes, and then that empowers me to do the work, and I know it, and that's how I form that relationship. But sometimes I can just neglect it because I feel busy and I'm stressed about all the things to do. So I'm all of that stuff. How are you?
Oh man, I'm in a very similar space. I think it's the Mercury in Pisces, the Pisces sun. There's this like real sacred infusion happening right now. And something that happened on our team call. So we have a weekly Astrology Hub, A-Team Angels team call. And today we took some time to reflect on how far we've come in a year personally, because this week is essentially, at least in the United States, the anniversary of lockdown. And like when things got really real and really weird, really fast. And so we took a moment to really reflect on the qualities that we've cultivated in the last year as individuals, and also the things that we want to thank ourselves for. So I highly encourage any of you who are feeling called to do this to take a moment to do it, because it was profound, and we shared with each other, and there were a lot of tears, and there was a lot of laughter, and so often I feel we forget to celebrate how far we've come, and to celebrate what you're saying there, what it is to just actually be alive and to be experiencing life as fully as we can. And one of the questions I had for you when you talked about your tea, I find that when I remember to do those things, it's always like, oh yeah, oh, it's so much better when I do this, but I don't always remember. And so are there cues or things we can use to remember to infuse the sacred into the everyday activities that we're doing?
Yeah, there's a really wonderful contemplation of the difference between discipline and devotion. Right. So, I mean, a example is like, oh, okay, I've been drinking too much. It's not working out in my relationship. Like, I'm just going to like stop drinking for 30 days, And then it's like the calendar flip every day, like whenever, and that's discipline. And sometimes it's super necessary, right?
Yeah.
Whereas devotion is like, this thing doesn't work. Like, I'm not setting some timeline. I'm just going to like release this energy for now. Right. And on the other side, like, how can I be like disciplined about a tea practice? It's helpful for me. Like, I have teacup tarot, right? So my friend Boo, for some time ago, made all the planet glyphs for me in teacups. And so just as we were beginning today, it's like, well, what are we going to talk about? Like, what's the right cup for that? And I was leaning to the moon. And I was like, no, I'm going to stay with this earth thing because I've been drinking out of the earth cup. And so for me, that's really helpful. There's so much in a symbol, right? Where when I go grab that cup, it's like, oh, wait, am I remembering to like earth and honor that this is part of the earth? So I think sometimes it's like, as it said in the mystery, like the language of the birds, right? Like how spirit speaks to us. And so much of that's really dependent upon the language that we've learned and the language that we know. And we can use that language to remind ourselves to stay in that devotion of what we know is sacred. And sometimes we just need discipline. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to go to yoga. And then every time after you do, it's the glow. And why don't I just want to go? And, and sometimes it's like, no, I'm just going to go every day or 5 days a week. And then, at some point it's just like, oh, I can't not do that because I love it so much. Right. So sometimes it's like the discipline will lead for the opportunity to have devotion. But sometimes like discipline, it can really keep you away from having that devotional experience too. It's a really interesting edge to walk.
Would you say that discipline is associated more with Saturn and devotion would be what? Saturn?
Well, I would love to hear in the comments, actually, and even before I respond to that, which planet, there's a lot of astrologers here with us live right now. We're seeing your comments. So which planet do you associate with devotion? So discipline is like an easier one, right? That feels very Saturnian. It's a structured thing. Time often comes into it. Commitment, very like Saturnian word. So I was thinking we would see Neptune, which just came in.
Yeah, the
moon, right? Which I actually love hearing. There's like a lot of things that are moon, and we see more moon here, that have kind of been repurposed for Neptune. In modern astrologers, like moon was queen of the dreams. Do you know what I mean? Like that's all the old stories are like, well, you sleep at night in the moon, right? And that's kind of in the Neptunian realm. We see some Venus here. We see Jupiter here as the planet of expansion. Jupiter in India is called Guru. And the traditional associations are Sagittarius and Pisces, kind of seeker and mystic, So I think there's a deep correspondence there. Felina wrote Vesta, right? So when we get into the asteroid set, that Vesta, Hestia in the Greek, the keeper of the sacred flame, the home and the hearth. So the cool thing is, I think the answer is all of them.
Yeah.
And for different purposes. They each have their different doorway into the one temple. Do you know what I mean? If you ask Venus to assist you with your devotions, it's going to come in a different way. Sometimes we need a little bit of a harder edge, right? And what am I devoting myself to? So if I'm going to devote myself to like running every morning and getting the calories burned and doing that kind of work, that's probably a Mars thing. Do you know what I mean? Mars isn't going to come like to mind. Nobody wrote Mars. Like Mars is going to be the first one you think of when you speak about devotion. For me, I think my initial response is Jupiter, but I think it's very personal, and I don't think there's a wrong answer.
It's funny because Saturn feels both discipline and devotion to me for some reason. And I also think that devotion, like you're saying, it really is all the above, because the key ingredient for devotion is the heart. And it's where you're coming from. It's that you're coming from this place of awe and wonder, which is the words you use as our keys to unlock the stories of the sky for ourselves, but also from a place of deep respect, a place of deep love, right? All these things, which feel like a lot of different planetary words in one. But I'm sure they had devotion before they knew about Neptune. So like you're saying, a lot of the moon things might have gotten transferred onto Neptune.
And I think Saturn would be maybe the one that I think of last for devotion, but hearing you say it, I think that it's right on. So many of my devotional practices have been, taught to me by elders. of different places.
Yeah.
And this is just how we do it. This is what makes sense. I mean, I'm reading, Caitlin just texted, thank you for recommending the book Lakota Star Knowledge, right? I mean, it's like, this is how the heavens were seen. And this is how we come to the earth. This is why you put your head on the ground before you walk into or crawl into the inipi, into the sweat lodge, right? This is why you crawl in sunwise and you crawl out sunwise, and there's a direction for this, right? This is why I loved in Hawaii receiving a teaching about how to bring offerings, right? And it's like, yeah, you're coming low, right? With this thing that raised up.
And you never turn your back. As you walk away from your offering, you still stay forward and you're still low and honoring.
And so sometimes, because these are in a sense Saturnian, they're structures and rules, and like, this is the way you do it. This is the right way to do a thing. But it doesn't mean like, and that same thing, it can be, I have a lot of wish to resist, and well, why can't I do it my way? Or, but we know that when we do it in the way that works, because it works, right? And then so much opens up. And so a lot of this is just like, oh, cool. Well, if I come to the work, if I, like, for me, a lot of it is, all right, well, I want to wake up and see this morning star. And that's going to be wake up and get in and take a drive and set up, off in the camera, and that it's going to be a work. But once I'm there, it's just peace. I mean, even if I have a thing to do.
I'm loving seeing too the sun. People, Corrine and a few people have said the sun. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Right? And isn't it so great? We say planet and we forget about the sun, or often the moon, which didn't happen in this flow today, which is lovely.
It has. Yeah. It did in the beginning. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The moon was just like all over the place, which is great. But yeah, I mean, the sun, I think the missing spiritual essence of the sun and some modern astrology today, where it's like your ego, like you'll hear the sun taught in that way. It's the center of it all. This is very kind of heliocentric cosmology. And I mean, when you and I have spoken about the sun since we started this thing, like, it's not like anyone could ever look at the sun and not honor that it's a very special and different thing than a Mars or a Jupiter or Saturn out there or whatever, right? I mean, it's only the sun that will tell you what time of day and what time of year and all that, right? But I think in some ways some of us have lost that deep spirit of the sun. Like in India, that's Surya, it's like the sage, it's wisdom, it rejoices. So in modern astrology, interestingly, not all modern astrology at all, like not in my modern astrology, but many associate the sun with the 5th house of children and romance and passions and play, without thinking that, wait a second, why would the sun want the 5th house? That's below the ground. And when the sun's below the ground, it's called nighttime. So why would the sun want nighttime? Like, for me, it's my favorite example I like to share of how far from nature our craft can get when it locks only into symbolism or learning and repeating without questioning and considering and practicing. Traditionally, the sun is said to rejoice in the 9th house, where the sun is not only at midday, which is true, but also after it's finished the daily climb and he's on his way down. And the 9th, right, of journeys, and it's siesta time in some places. And traditionally, the 9th is called the house of God. So there's a lot. Like, one of my favorite stories is do you know about Hanuman?
Well, ish.
Yeah. So
Probably not what you're going to say.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go there because it'll be our whole time. But Hanuman, he was a very miraculous birth, and he had very magical powers even from the beginning. And he went to eat the sun because it looks like a mango, of course. And it was one of these days that was meant to be an eclipse. So that's Rahu's turn to eat the sun and seek vengeance, as he does. And so Hanuman was punished for this. And he eventually, long story short, was in a sense cursed to forget his magic. And then he still was tuned in, and he studied with the sun, and he became a great sage in Surya's guidance. I will, just because I shared enough, there's this wonderful part in this story where he remembers his magic, because the curse was that he would forget his gifts, and he was cursed because he was using his powers to like steal the clothes from the elders who were meditating and doing all this trickster stuff because it was like fun, and he could get away with it because he was so powerful. And so they went to Brahma and were like, this guy has too much power. He's like a little kid. He's not mature enough for it. It's like, okay, so the curse was not until he remembers it. And there's this wonderful time in the story where he's just kind of lamenting. And he says out loud, I wish I could just turn myself into a giant and step across this ocean. And Jambavan is there. He's like, why don't you? It's like, what do you mean? He's like, you just said, turn yourself into a giant and step across the ocean. He said, why don't you? And he says, oh, because I'm just like a monkey. And he's like, dude, you're Hanuman. You can do whatever you want. And that was this time where suddenly, right? And so I have to see at least that much of that tale through, because this is what it is to step into our sacred living, right? When we are reminded of our magic. You know, it often does come through from an outsider, right? And through the weird experiences and the teachings. It often comes when we need for it to, like where we won't survive unless we have a devotional practice. Where, if you don't like, heavy story, but a dear friend of mine, her son was killed in a drunk driving accident. He was young and thriving, and she climbed the mountain every day. I mean, she had to, but she still does, she had to, but then the mountain reminded her who she was and what that whole thing's about, And so sometimes now she climbs the mountain because it's what she does, but usually she climbs the mountain because the mountain reminds her what it is to be a human being. And I think that's really important in our lives, like trying to keep that flame. Like, it's really alive for me right now because I'm creating this video course, and it's like, great, let's talk about the ecliptic. And it's hard not to do that without just like landing in geek mode, right? And like, I love to show all the animations. I want to show what it is. I'm going to teach people what the zodiac is. So I call the ecliptic the circle of spirit. And there's a good reason why I do so. I mean, some people have taken some of my courses with some of the organizations, and it's like, why do you bring all this like shamanism, the shami-dami stuff into this? Like, why don't we just like learn the words in that? But I really want us to reclaim that, where it's always been, where our magic, some of us have forgotten. I certainly forgot. I was raised in a tradition that begs me to forget the magic that we have as human beings. But astrology herself, I'm sure, is born out of a sacred relationship with the living sky. And it's a lot easier for me to transmit that to a student if we're standing side by side out under the night. Although it's it's hard to do that with 30 students because it's all just giggle laughter time, which is great, but it's hard to kind of like to transmit the thing. And so a lot of my challenge right now, and it has been this way, but it's like, great, how do I pass on what I'm receiving? And more importantly than me just saying, this is what it is, this is how you listen. Tell me what it is. And I don't expect you to hear what I heard. You are you, right? The language of the birds is a unique and it's an individual thing. And we have been building it up our whole lives. And when you become aware, right, you become aware of this language that you have. So trying to create a video course, as I say again and again, like, let me show you on the small screen, but this is integrated only and not right away through your experiences with the big screen, with the living sky. You've got to go outside and just look up and wonder, and like, that's it, right? So there's a thing that I say, it's connection, direction, reflection, reception. Right. So even if I'm up early in the morning, gotta go see the triple conjunction, and that's what I'm there for. And I want to take a picture. I want to show everybody who's got cloudy skies, and I want to use this for the video course. And it's like, nope. When you get out there, first and foremost, put it all away. Listen to your heart. Listen to Earth's heart. Connect in. And if you miss the opportunity to take a picture, who cares? That's not really what you're there for. And you can speak about the planets, but they speak to you if you choose to listen. And we can't listen when we're rushing around, right? Mm-hmm. So that like connection bit, sometimes it's the whole practice. And then, whatever, I couldn't take a picture, and so what? So connection directions, then tuning into the cardinal directions, which has been at the heart of my own study. And I know now is literally what the foundations of the tropical zodiac are. Like so many ancient shamanic systems, the tropical zodiac literally is a system based upon the energy of the cardinal direction. So I have these postures that I hold. I always tune into the directions. It's like, cool, now I know where I am. And the part of my direction practice is actually determining the chart of the moment when the stars are out. Just working with the directions, working with the sky. That's one thing I love to teach. And I'm making all these like bonus videos of just me out in my practice. Here's a tree, it's south, that's the star, this is what we're seeing. And so, okay, and so Sagittarius is at the midheaven and Aquarius is rising right now. It's like, right? And then maybe I'll do the app and confirm that what I'm seeing is real or how close I am and all that. But it's better not. It's just like, nope, I know that. I feel like, great. Now let me receive what's going on. And maybe I came out there to see Mercury and Jupiter and Saturn, but as I'm out there, Altair is like, look at me. I'm an eagle, fool. And I'm like, all right, and it's just all up there, and okay, it's like these characters brought me out. They're like, hey, you should come see our show. And then, by the way, we're opening for this guy, or, you go to a show and you like the opener more sometimes. It's like, that was the Altair the other day. Okay, cool. So I want to make sure that I'm open to kind of completing the mission, right? And like doing the yoga, but the realist yoga, like the deepest part of it is like, I'm just doing this to hear and receive. And actually I can be so buried, and this is a human thing, right? We can be so buried in our expectations. This is actually a terror for astrology. I will predict this will happen then. And then you're like so busy looking for the thing you predicted that you don't notice that it's happening. Just in a different way than you thought it was supposed to go. How many people made their like magical list of their perfect partner and didn't know that she was standing right next to her because she made the list? And I think it's that's a lot of like in my own work. It's like, great, I'm going to go out for these very specific things. Literally, I'm going to teach this video course. I want to get like the different phases of the moon, good photographs so I can show people. But maybe I'm going to photograph the moon like I was last night. And what is that star? And the moon's like, cool, I just brought you out here so you could look at this character. And I'm like, I don't even, who is that? Right. And then that's my whole night suddenly. And hours go by. And I have to like be in a space where it's like, I only have so much time in the day and the night. And yet I can't shame myself for not running back in and taking the photo card and putting in the computer and getting straight to the work I'm supposed to do, because that's the work I'm supposed to do.
Yes, that is so, there's a femininity about that, about being able to receive what is there versus trying to determine what you think it's supposed to be or how it's supposed to happen. And there's several things you said that I would love to reflect on and have you expand upon. There was this, what you said about how we've taken spirit out of the sun. We have de-spiritualized the sun in the way that we talk about it in astrology a lot of the time. And one of the things you brought in was the spiritualization also of the directions. Before every weekly weather that I do with Anne Ortley, she calls in the directions. And I know you do this all the time too. And I've heard so many people do this. I still have a hard time. Like every time you do it, I get more of the spiritual essence, but I still have a hard time understanding how a direction has spiritual essence. Like, what is the direction? Is it just the way that I'm facing? Like, is it a thing? You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes it's hard for me to connect with, but the more Anne is doing it every Monday, I'm getting the watch, and just, being born and raised Catholic and all of us doing this and realizing this is the directions that we were doing.
Totally. Yeah.
And there's something at the end, she always says, and now the circle is cast, and we stand in the center of the circle with the direction, with the 4 directions. And it's like, there's something powerful about it, but I still don't totally get it. I'm hoping you can expand upon it.
Cool. So scavenger hunt of the week / month, year, decade, lifetime. Go sit east and then go sit south. And yeah, so, and I mean like 4 hours minimum, day or night, like preferably night. I see DeMarcus. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Maybe DeMarcus. Your electromagnetic field in relationship to the Earth, like for sure, like the compass directions. Jamie and we were speaking about this, like which direction should she sleep? Should you sleep? And I like do that based upon my connection to understanding of the directions, and the way I'm doing it is wrong according to like a lot of like electromagnetic theory that Jamie was sharing. So I got to go learn something that night, which was cool. Importantly, we do have magnetic directions, right? So like what the compass points to. And then we have true directions. And what's the difference, right? So Earth has a magnetic field, many planets do. And just like any magnetic anything, there's a north and the south pole of that. And however, the magnetic north pole is not Earth's north pole, is not there. And the south pole is not there. The magnetic poles, they actually migrate. There's a theory that they reverse sometimes over long periods, and like strange things, right? But this is true directions. And I mean, I like to show this thing. My little Earth's starting to fall apart, but I took a coat hanger and put it through so I could really show, right? I like to call this Gaia's spine. She's had many names, but the world tree, right? Which literally emanates from the heart of our planet and moves through the terrestrial poles and points to what we call the celestial poles in space. So a lot of my course is like how to tune into that. Because like if I know, we're really blessed in our day and age for those who are living in the northern hemisphere, and I'll be teaching southern hemisphere too. But if you know North Star, well, at night you can go give your heart to that star, and now you are cardinal, right? And so I'm like then working with the north. Now I'll say, regardless, in the northern hemisphere, the north energy, well, Polaris will teach me where the directions live. North is down there, because for the northern hemisphere, that's where the sun is at midnight. And I don't mean clock midnight, right? I mean halfway between sunset or sunrest and sunrise, the sun roots. And in the northern hemisphere, that's north, and in the southern hemisphere, that's south. So the north for me has that energy. And when I compare that to like the Dakota tradition that I, just learned a little bit of from elders, right? And there's animals that are associated with each of the directions, right? So now, interestingly, you go to Peru, and for them, north is like hummingbird. Because in the southern hemisphere, that direction, which here up north hosts the midnight sun, in the southern hemisphere, it's the top of the sky, or it's the midday light. And that's that hummingbird in flight, you see? So a lot of this really can be very local. I see Sherry write, I begin in the east and go clockwise. Well, so does the sun if you live in the northern hemisphere. And that's why clockwise actually is called sunwise. Now, it's interesting, it's a tale of two hemispheres, because that's reversed in the southern hemisphere. And that's something to sit with and work with. It's a very important thing for tropical astrologer is actually to face, which is that the tropical signs are not constellational, not at all. And you've noticed this, Amanda, I know, and many people, when you're out there with your phone and you're like, oh, let's look at, that's Pisces sun. You're like, whoa, that's like very Aquarius. Like, what's going on with that, right? So is my zodiac wrong? No, it's just absolutely not constellational. And many people will live their whole life as students of astrologer, and some even as teachers who would never connect those dots, pun intended. It's people will say, well, the tropical zodiac's seasonal. Okay, but how are you going to deal with? And I was just with a student before we came on. I was like, why does the tradition say the sun rules Leo? She said, oh, it's the hottest time of the year. Tell it to somebody in Brazil. So that's challenging. Do we need to flip the flow? Does it only work for the Northern Hemisphere because it's rooted there? The answer is not. And last week we were talking about this whole draconic bull thing. And one thing that I kind of just snuck in there is, well, the Earth is moving north through space.
Right.
So there's one place where I will suggest on Earth that has the least experience of seasons. Where would you say that is?
Well, here in Hawaii, we don't have a whole lot of experience of seasons.
Yeah, so the equator.
Right.
If you're thinking like a surface dweller, I'm talking about the center of the Earth.
Ah, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
And I imagine that there is some kind of experience in that place about whether the sun's at the northern pole or the southern pole, which would be June solstice and December solstice respectively, but probably much less experience even than it is in Hawaii, and certainly less so than it is in Siberia, right? So there is, when we measure the directions from the center of the Earth, and we can, because they're defined by her spine, by the axis of our daily rotation, right? By the way, this is module 2, friends, the cross of matter. Anyway, I'm like so in my video course right now. Like module 2, chapter 4. Anyway, but like there is this directionality, and because the Earth is moving north through space, there's actually kind of a global directionality, which is an amazing thing to consider. And I've heard whispers from some who studied with elders in Australia who have said that, yeah, they've long known that the northern side of the Earth is like the bow of the ship, and that they're at the stern, right? Which is totally in agreement with this thing that we've known astronomically now for a few hundred years. And it helps us then have, I would say, more of a sacred relationship to that astronomical happening. We can just think, well, the Earth is flying through space and the sun, aren't we so small? So some people and a lot of like rationalists teach that. You look up, there's so many stars, every star is a sun, you're just some tiny insignificant. I'm like, the more we discover, the bigger you are. Right? Because you are that. Anyway, so the practice that I employ, and it's been a bit, it really used to be a thing I would do at least monthly, is one night I'll go out, get directions. I'll ask North Star to teach me. I will be showing folks in the video course also how we can work the night sky in the southern hemisphere to get directions, but also how we can work with the midday shadow, which tells you the meridian, right? So as I'm out aligning the new garden, huge planter box, I'm doing like sacred geometry design and choosing like lengths by like sacred numbers and the days it takes the moon to orbit the Earth and all these things, right? I'm also very much just like, okay, and we align it by the midday shadow points on the meridian, where I'm going to align this to the true directions. And my compass isn't going to tell, like, I'm not going to trust it. I'm going to look at my chart for when the sun is at the midheaven. I'm going to put a stick in the ground, or I will be that stick, and I will stand tall, and I will see that my shadow is pointing to a star that I can't see. But when the sun sets and later on tonight, I will confirm my like daily shadow alignment with the lights of the heavens, right? So what I like to go out, and you bring all your warms, this is a really important thing when you go out to the sky. Because if you really can go out and get committed and devoted is a much better word, time goes away. It's amazing. Like the stars are just moving so slowly. And then a couple hours later, you're like, what? And they're like, they're over there now. And where have I been? You've just been in the temple. You're just receiving. And it's not meant to be always like these linear, logical things you're figuring out. I used to say this all the time. I'd like wake up, just know a thing. So I dreamed of this last night, I would say. Well, I didn't have a recollection of the dream, but I don't know when else I woke up knowing a thing. Right? The going to the sky is like that, right? So sometimes it's like, oh, that sign actually rises south. I did this the other day. It's like, took a picture of where the sun set on the mountain yesterday. And then I saw a Facebook memory. It's like, from last year. Turns out the sun set in the exact same place. I guess that's a yearly phenomenon, but things were a little bit different at this time last year, as you invoked earlier, right? So, and that's a wonderful thing in and of itself to consider, right? But so when we're out in the temple, like time just goes by. But so one thing that I'll do, and that's why I say just bring all your warms. You can actually, it's amazing. When the sun hits the IC in the middle of the night, if you're out, it goes from cold to really super effing cold in a moment. You can feel it in the inside of your bones, right? And now I've known that like, so I'll be out there and it's like, oh, sun's at the IC. And I'll cast a chart and it's like, whoa, like exactly. You can feel it, right? Like that's the hardest, like easy to see sunrise and know when the sun rises, easy to know when the sun sets. Midday is super easy if you learn a few things that I'll be certainly teaching you. Midnight's a tricky one, right? You're not going to do it with your eyes on the sun. You're going to do it with your heart and your body. Right. And that's more in that kind of devotional space, if you will, that receiving space. And the energy comes in. Right. So you're in this place and time goes away. So this is like, all I wanted to say is bring a jacket, a scarf, 2 hats, tea, bring your stuff, something comfortable. If you're scared of bugs, a few blankets, a lounge chair, whatever. It's okay. If you're scared of people, do it in the backyard. Even if it's not dark skies, bring a friend, whatever. It's important to be comfortable and cozy if we really want to receive body information, right? Sometimes it's easier to get in the body when you're uncomfortable. It's okay. It's good to work with that sometimes, But anyway, so my direction practice, it's just I'll find the directions and then I'll just like give myself to the east for the night. And look, they could land a Zeta Reticulan spaceship in the Southwest and I'm not going to look. Like I have just gave myself to the east. And I say that, east, I'm Brett. I give myself to you. This is east. So let me say north because the microphone. North, I'm Brett. I give myself to you. I ask you, please, to give just a piece of yourself to me. Will you teach me? Will you be my guide? Right? And this makes me cry because it's like, it's a real thing for me. And then I receive these teachings and they might not agree with what I learned from elders. And they should probably disagree with what I learned from elders in Peru because the North works very differently. The East doesn't. Everywhere in the world, the East is the place of the rise. And that makes sense, right? Like you can go watch a sunrise. The sky's always rising in the East, and when you go experience it, it's a whole nother thing. The first time I watched a solar eclipse after I've become semi-conscious or whatever this state I'm in, and I saw the moon moving in front of the sun, I was like, oh, the moon's closer to me than the sun is. Well, I know that, but I didn't know that. So that's what I would recommend for you, Amanda. When you go out and you sit with these directions and you meet them and you ask them, to meet you and to guide you. And then getting back to expectations, if you, here's what I saw in the East one time. I think I've shared this here. I don't know, and it was on Haleakala, right? And I had a lot of clothes and I sat. It was me and those like interesting plants. They're like the only thing that grows up. It's like just us, Nobody was gonna be around.
The silver sword. The Silver Swords. They have a Hawaiian name too, but yeah.
Yeah, so it was me and the Silver Swords, and we were like, and I was as still as those things, right? And it was like 4 hours, and I was just like, whoa, the eastern sky does the Aries glyph. What? Like, nobody taught me that. And I could just see it. The stars literally just traced the Aries glyph in the sky. And the east works like that always. And I'll show people in the course, that's why Aries is the eastern sign. It's also why we say Easter and all sorts of other things, right? And it's why the ram, because the eastern sky, if you sit at night, it literally describes the horns of the ram, and then it hooks back around like a ram's horn to set in the west. Right. So part of the course actually is like teaching sacred astronomy through the glyphs that we use. Like next month, actually, we're going to have a really good example of the Taurus glyph is the sun and the moon, and their exalted degrees. It's like really close. You can actually see them. And it does the Taurus glyph in your sky. Right. So yeah, so the practice, and I like to go sunwise. So in the northern hemisphere, that means regardless of where you start. But if you're in the north, then you're going to go in the northern hemisphere. Sunwise is clockwise. So the next time you'll go sit east. And it could be the next night, it could be the next week. It's just the next time. Then you sit south, and then you sit west. And then you can do the above, which is great. You just lay on your back. And the above is amazing and chaotic, and the below, like, you know, bring a respirator or something. Like, that's pretty tricky if you just have your face straight down, right? But all this helps us get into the middle, and it's amazing. Like in the Pythagorean system, the hexahedron, which is the cube, was associated with the earth element. And you're like, yeah, because it's really solid. Like of the so-called Platonic solids, like it is the one that is grounded. But it's also when you're in the middle, like you were saying, Anne says, now we're in the middle of the circle. But you're also in the middle of the cube. And there's up and a down face. And there's 4 here, right? Those 4 cardinal directions. Yeah. So you just got to go meet them.
Thank you. That is the best answer ever. I mean, I have had that question for a long time. I would sort of go through the motions and do what people were doing, but it was like, God, I don't feel this. I don't feel this. But what you just described is how I would be able to feel it. And the other thing I'm loving about what you're sharing is I'll bring it full circle to the thing I shared in the beginning. As our team was going around sharing the biggest thing we were celebrating or grateful for, the biggest place of growth, pretty much every single person has learned to trust their internal voice throughout the year. That has been the biggest. They've learned to trust it. They've learned to see its value. They've learned to stop questioning it. They've learned to follow that voice. And what you have been explaining is a way that we can get more confident and comfortable trusting that voice as it relates to our astrological practice, because we're having a direct experience. When we have a direct experience, we can trust that because we know it, because it happened and we felt it. It's in us then. And the thing too is that you said so many times we sort of relinquish our power to whoever the teacher was or whatever got passed down. And so much of what was shared in our call today was people saying, I used to listen outside of myself. I used to have others dictate what was right for me or what I should be afraid of or what I shouldn't do. And I don't do that anymore, at least not as much. And so what I love about this offering that you're bringing to our community, and I love that you get to do it in the way that feels right for you, which doesn't skimp on this aspect of it, this sacred aspect, the way that you connect with the sky. I'm so grateful that you're bringing that, because I know that when people have that experience, not only will it enrich their astrology, but it will enrich their lives.
That's what we want, right? All these things that we can study, what are we doing it for?
Right.
right? And all these things that we can teach, what are we doing it for? Right? That's the thing, right? And it, I mean, we got to eat, and profit's not a criminal thing, right? It's important to remember. But, can you look at yourself at the end of the day and say, I gave what I could, like I gave what I learned, and I think that's where I'm at today. It's like, all right, well, that was a good take of that information, but when I watch that back, it's just really like science guy and dry. And sometimes that's gonna be how it is because I'm teaching some of the astronomy stuff, and sometimes it's like that. But it's like, or let's talk more about how we experience that. And it's not really as much as me, sharing what I'm learning from the sky, but sharing how to learn from the sky.
Yeah.
What's a rose smell like, Amanda?
Oh man.
Right. So look, you can answer that questions in the words, but as I just asked you that, you just smelled a rose.
Yes, I did.
Well, how could you smell a rose if you've never smelled a rose? You know what I'm saying? That's the same thing. Like if you want to really connect into these direction ceremonies, you got to go smell the rose. And then once you do, like, I can't describe what a rose smells like, really, but I might be smelling a very different thing than you're smelling when we both smell the same rose. Or you know what I mean? But it's still, it's like how I know Rose, and therefore it's like what Rose wishes to teach me or teach through me, So that's a huge part of this idea of the language of the birds too. Like I can go look at a star and I can go find out that I have a planet aligned to that star, and I can go find out what Ptolemy said about that star and who are the people since and or I can go look at a star. And the star's not going to be able to look at me if I'm like creating this wall of all the things that all the people have ever said about you. And, I mean, it's going to like start dissolving that wall if I then say, and is that true? Or how does that work? But it's so much easier. Did I tell you about Bob the Star? Probably during our time. Okay. Right? So I met a star in Hawaii, that's Silly Chicken or Crazy Carl. That's not what the star is called in our apps and what the Greeks had to say. That's just my experience with that star. And I think it's really important that we, instead of what they say, you can give a man a fish or teach a man to fish, whatever, like I don't want to like just tell you what I found in the temple like it's some gospel. I just want to tell you how I found a door to the temple, and then I get to learn. Like I'm always learning from my students, right? Because I show them a way in, they get in there and they're like, and this, and it's like, whoa, amazing.
Well, and that's one of the coolest things about the upcoming course with Brett is there will be a private online community where you will get to in real time share your experiences. Brett will be in there, as we're calling it a study group, but you'll have this place where you can share with your fellow students. So it's so exciting. And I just want to thank you for bringing your full heart and soul to this and sharing that with all of us. And also, what you said about the way that you approach the stars. Can you imagine if we approached each other, and I know a lot of times we do, with like, here are all my preconceived notions of who I think you are, and I'm going to tell you who you are, and I'm going to just put you in a little box and you're going to stay there because someone told me this about you. Or what you're saying you do is, hey, I've heard these things about you. Are they true? Who are you? I want to know you. I want to know you. And then, of course, your experience of that star or that person will be totally unique to you. Nobody else is going to have that same experience of that person or that star. So again,
it's like the sacred way.
Yeah,
right?
We're doing this with the astrology, with the astronomy, and this is what I'm saying, where it also will translate into so many areas of our lives. And I know so many of you do these things already, and it'll just be another unfolding level of that for you, which is amazing. So
yeah, it's a really good point. And then that's the next level of understanding or mastery, when there's a thing that we're all geared towards a love, a skill. It's, we don't all find it. Actually, I mean, for me, I started asking most when I was playing music and realizing that actually, and it was painful to realize that that wasn't my thing. I always like wanted that to be my thing and love it. And I'm a good musician, played with great musicians, and it was just like a struggle. But I answered that struggle instead of shutting down and saying, I'm just not as good at this thing as I want to be. And I'm not making myself, I don't have the discipline to get good at it. It was like, or maybe this isn't it. And so if we meet the challenge with the question, right, then these new doorways open. But the next level too is like you find your thing, you rock your thing. How do you let what you can do there come back into the rest of your life, which is what you're saying, and man, it's a really good teaching for me, right? It's like, cool. Why would it be easier for me to have a relationship like with a star than some random person in the street who's bugging me? It's like it's harder for the star to bug me as instantly. Maybe it could be a decent answer to that question, actually. But right, like wherever we're learning, wherever we're studying, let's bring that way of life to our way of engaging with life, and that circles back to this: everything is sacred, and discipline and devotion.
Discipline and devotion. One quick thing before we close up, Brett. You just shared your story with music and how you wanted to be good at it, and you actually were good at it. No, you wanted it to be your life and you were good at it, but it was like there was that struggle. On Friday, I'm going to be interviewing for the Astrology Hub podcast Ricky Williams, who's the former NFL player. And he has a similar story. I mean, here's this celebrated NFL football player who
Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah.
I mean, Ricky was the best running back. He's one of my principal chart examples that I use in my vocational studies, teaching with people. Amazing.
And he played football with my brother at University of Texas, sidebar. But here's the call. And instead of being like, I'll let him tell the story, but he becomes an astrologer. I mean, he's this huge NFL star. Like he should want to do that for the rest of his life, right? According to our society. And instead he's like, I'm being called to be an astrologer. I'm being called to do something very different. And he did it. And so, all of us have these things in our lives that we're doing. And so many of us called to astrology, which is really cool, especially right now. But I just think there's so many lessons in everything that you're saying. And I thank you again for that. And for any of you who would like to continue this journey and going deeper with Brett, and like he said, letting him teach you how to have that connection yourself, our wait list is open. We're actually opening up enrollment this weekend for the Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers class. If you're on the wait list, you'll be the first to be able to get in. And there are some gifts waiting for you right when you do enroll. So you may want to get on that wait list. It's astrologyhub.com/sacred astronomy. Shoot, just sacred.
No, Sacred Astronomy.
Okay. We've been talking so much about sacred today. I was like, did we just make it that? Okay. astrologyhub.com/sacred astronomy. And I know so many of you are already on that wait list, and we can't wait to have you in class. But Brett, thank you for this journey today. It was such, again, this whole day has felt so like Piscean, like floaty from thing to thing. And I just really appreciated the conversation today. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And now I have my Scavenger Hunt. I don't know if everybody else's Scavenger Hunt is the same. Are we going out and
absolutely sit the directions and report back? When I was telling Anna, I was like, hey, I really want to do like a study group for this, or just a place where everyone can speak about what they're seeing. And she's like, okay, but you got to be really careful with your language because people will expect you to be there if you don't say. I was like, no, I want to like do this for me because I need to learn. And so I can't be there all the time. There hopefully there's gonna be a lot of people sharing and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like that's where I get these big ahas. It's like any teacher understands that you start really learning the next level of the subject when you begin to teach it. And if you're humble enough to say like, "Ooh, I was wrong about that," and especially to learn from your students. My favorite saxophone player has always been Dexter Gordon. And Coltrane learned listening to Dexter, and then Coltrane went and did his thing, and then Dexter learned from listening to Coltrane.
So
and
cool.
It's that's how we want to release ourselves from the idea of linear everything, and like the sky, do cycles. Do you know what I mean? And so it always wants the leaf falls to become compost for the new seed, right? And so for me, it's like the greatest gift if I can hear back from people and hear about their experiences, because it just accelerates the learning in a huge way. So anyway, Amanda, once again, it's really nice to spend some time with you. And for everybody here, what a treat. It's really wonderful to feel your hearts, I think, especially today. And we look forward to see where this thing goes.
Absolutely. Aaron's wondering if the class is running in April. And the answer to that, Aaron, is yes. So enrollment is opening this weekend, and then it's a 6-week course that will be starting April 1st.
I can't remember if we decide. Yeah, April 1st, I think, is when the first batch of videos are sent out. Oh, specifically from the East Coast time zone, because I liked that chart more than, right? So I definitely, I promised Amanda I wouldn't use too many different astrological elections during. I need this thing released from Iowa at 2:30 on a Tuesday.
Well, it's not because we don't love that. It's just because sometimes it's not technically possible to do what you're asking. But, Christopher Renstrom in the weekly horoscope, I don't know if you're all getting those emails. If you're not, sign up. It's free. astrologyhub.com/horoscope. His little 5-minute intro video for the week was all about one of the things was why April 1st is April Fool's. And it has to do with the calendar, and it has to do with the Gregorian calendar and King George coming in and saying, no, this is the new year, which was January 1st. And that anybody who didn't get the memo was called a fool because they were still celebrating the old New Year. And this is a really fascinating historical context for April 1st, which is the day that class is going to start for sacred astronomy.
Right. The real New Year. Fool. Yes. I just want to respond. There's one comment that I saw was I'll be traveling, but I really want to do the course. Because there's a question mark. I feel it's a question, not a statement. Good. Yes. Do the course while you're traveling, the best, because it's one thing to learn the sky from one place, but oh my gosh, if you get in a plane and go somewhere else, the sky works a little bit differently. And to be able to have that experience, the very simple things I'm teaching you to get this and then go see it in another place, suddenly you realize that the Earth's not flat and all sorts of amazing things. So please join us while you're traveling. I mean, everything's getting released by videos. And then there's just once a week, there's a live question and answer. There's also, before the Q&A, another thing I asked for is that we have a watch party, so that if you're not inclined to watch 7 short videos a week at your own pace, which is how I'm designing the course, but you'd rather watch it together, cool. We're going to do that before the weekly Q&A. So before the weekly Q&A, we'll have the 7 short videos, which will be about 2 hours total every week. And you can come and chat and watch that stuff in a format kind of like this. And then we'll do an hour and a half or 2 hours of live Q&A. So you can do this from wherever in the world. You can do it while you're traveling. You can do it at your own pace. And you're going to want to watch these videos maybe many times in the future too. They all have little Easter eggs, little codes.
And you're going to have access to the recordings as long as Astrology Hub is in existence, which hopefully is forever. Forever. She's going to be in Uluru in the Outback.
Amazing.
Wow.
Right. Cool. So one of the most sacred places on the earth. So yeah, regardless of whether you take the course or not, I can't wait to hear what your experience is there. Please come back to this place and give us the good word. It's a place I cannot wait to go sometime in this life.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning into this episode of StarryTelling, for being a part of our community, for sharing all of your experiences and your enthusiasm with us here at Astrology Hub. We really, really appreciate all of you. Brett, so much appreciation for you. Thank you. And we'll catch you all on the next episode. See you soon.